Hello everybody, this is Kathy Salisbury, the director of the Ambler Arboretum at Temple University. You can learn more about the Arboretum by visiting arboretum.temple.edu. Today I am here to talk to you a little bit about what you look for and what you look at when you're trying to identify a plant. And as you venture out into your Great American Campout virtually or try to explore more of nature, sometimes we want to know what the names of the plants are that are around us. And why do we care what the names of the plants are? Well, sometimes it's just nice to know the name. We care more about things when we know the names of them. And we can talk with other people about them if we know the names of them. And we could teach other people about them if we know the names of them. We also, sometimes we wonder if we can eat something, if we can eat the plants that are around us. And the only way we can know that for sure is if we figure out who exactly it is. And also sometimes we're wondering if we should touch it or not, if it's going to cause us problems, like poison ivy causes rashes on some people. We need to know if it's something that's going to bother us. And so we need to learn the names for that reason too. So there's all kinds of reasons to learn the names of plants. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the details that you should look for when you're learning how to figure out one plant from the other. And so the first is plant type. So what you first should figure out is if you're looking at a tree, and a tree has one solid trunk, maybe a couple of trunks, but it's very tall. It's usually taller than it is wide. It has this trunk here. They can get pretty big, and generally a single stem with bark. And bark is the outer part of the trunk that protects itself. And the bark can be a distinguishing characteristic also. So you can see here, this is a beech tree. And one of the ways I know this is because it has a smooth gray bark. And so whether it's a tree or a shrub or a herbaceous plant is something that doesn't have any bark on it at all. A shrub also has bark. Will help you start to figure out who it is. In addition to the bark and the habit of the tree, so the habit is whether it's a tree or a shrub has multiple stems, is usually shorter than it is tall, but it also has bark. It's a woody plant, it has bark. And remember, herbaceous plants don't have any bark. They don't have any wood that forms on them, and they die down at the end of the year usually. So whether or not it's a tree, a shrub, or a herbaceous plant can help you start figuring out what type of plant it is. If it's the time of the year where the plants have leaves on them, you can use the leaves to help you identify who the plant might be. So this is still our beech tree. And some of the identifying characteristics that we look at on a leaf are the shape of the leaf, the veins, the pattern of the veins on the leaf, the edges of the leaf. What do the edges look like? Are they serrated? Do they have teeth like a knife, a serrated knife does? Or are they smooth? We might notice if they're hairy or not, if the leaves have any hairs on them. And we want to look at the top and the bottoms of the leaves. So we want to look at the undersides too, because they can give us clues too. Is it lighter on the underside? Are the veins more prominent on the underside? See here, this leaf, the veins kind of end at a little tooth on the edge of the leaf. So we call this a serrated leaf margin. Notice the tip of the leaf. Is it pointy? Is it rounded? Is it heart-shaped? And then notice the base of the leaf. Look at the base of the leaf here. So this is the base of the leaf. And is the base of the leaf, what's the shape of that? Is it wedge-shaped? Is it heart-shaped? Is it pointed? Is it rounded? Does it look like two ears on the either side of the stem? Those are all good clues for using to identify a plant and how to tell plants apart. Another clue on the leaf is called the leaf stem, and that's called the petiole. That's the leaf stem. On these plants, you could see that the petiole is very short. It's a very short leaf stem. And you could see there's hairs there. Do you see those hairs there? So those are clues to the identification of this plant as well. This is American beech here, grown in the woods. And we're going to compare these leaves, to another type of leaf. You tell the difference. Here we have another kind of leaf. You can see this is a much different shape than the leaf we were looking at before. This is still a tree. It has a single trunk and it has bark on it, which tells us it's a tree. But this leaf has some different characteristics than the beech leaf we were looking at before. This is a sugar maple leaf, and some of the characteristics of the maple leaf are, see the leaf stems? They're much longer. That's the petiole. See that petiole there? That is, the leaf is dancing. So that's the petiole, that leaf stem there. So that's much longer. The color, whether or not it's hairy, and the length of the leaf stem are, or petiole, are all clues to identification. Here also you see the leaf. And so notice how this leaf has these indentations. And we can count what we call lobes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lobes on this leaf. So we call these lobes. And then it has its pointed ends of the lobes also. And so those are all characteristics that help us tell a beech tree from a maple tree. So here we have lobes. Notice the veins on this leaf start from a central point and radiate out, kind of like the fingers radiate out from the palm of your hand. This is called palmate leaf veination. And knowing whether it's palmate or what we saw in the beech tree where they kind of come straight up and then go out side to side, which is called pinnate leaf veination, helps us with identifying plants as well. So we know that we can use the habit, whether it's a tree or shrub or herbaceous plant. We know that we can use the bark, whether it's smooth or colorful or rough or flakes off in shreds and chunks that might fall off of the tree. And we know we can use the leaves if they're lobed, if they're serrated, what the petiole or leaf stem looks like, if the leaf is hairy or if it's serrated. Those are all clues to us to help us figure out what kind of plant this is. As I'm making this video, it occurs to me that there might be another reason why you would want to know the name of a plant and to be able to positively identify it. So we talked about how you might want to eat it or you might want to not touch it because it might cause itchy skin like poison ivy does. But you also might want to pull it out. You might think it's a weed or learn that it's a weed. And so as I was walking, recording this video, I noticed this in my woods, and I'm very sad to see this. This is an invasive plant, and we have other videos about invasive plants and what invasive plants are, but basically they cause problems in natural spaces. They outcompete native plants, and they usually aren't much benefit to wildlife and to the ecosystem where it's found. And so I found this plant, and I could use my identification skills, which told me right away that this is the invasive plant called myelominute. And let me just show you, as far as identification goes, what features I looked at to confirm this. The first is that it has very distinctive triangle-shaped leaves. See how that looks just like a triangle? So that is a good giveaway. Not too many plants look like that. Also, its habit. It grows in a big vine. So I just picked all of this up, and it grows in a long vine. It's sort of all connected. It just crawls over everything. So the triangle leaves and that it's a vine is a good clue. The other clues on this particular plant are that where the leaves come out of the vine, stems, there's these little appendages here that encircle the stem. They're modified leaves that encircle the stems wherever the leaves come out. And so when I see those, that's another check mark that tells me that this is this invasive plant. We call it myelominute vine because it grows so fast. You could sit and watch it grow, it seems like. One time you see a little bit of it, and the next thing you know, it's all over the place. So here's these little appendages that are growing wherever the leaves come out. So that's another good clue. And finally, another common name for this plant, besides myelominute vine, is tear thumb. And that's because when you take it out of the ground, when you try to pull it out, it has these tiny little hooked barbs on the stems that can tear your thumb when you pull it out. So you have to be careful when you're pulling it out. So when I take everything into consideration, when I look at this plant, I see the triangle-shaped leaves, the little appendages where the leaves come out, the miniature hooked barbs on the stems, and the fact that it's a vine, I know for certain that I have mile-a-minute vine here and I should remove it so it doesn't start taking over my woods. Here's another tree. This is a seedling. It's just starting to grow. This is another tree, single stem with a bark on it. And I wanted to show you this one because it grows all around here. And this has lobed leaves. We looked at the maple, which had lobed leaves, but it also had points and serrations. And this one doesn't. It's entire. There's no serrations or other markings around the edges of this leaf. But there are these lobes. And in this case, on this kind of tree, we can find different shapes of leaves. So we have this kind of leaf, which some people call the Casper the Friendly Ghost shape leaf, right? Or we have just one simple leaf here, no lobes and no serrations on the edges. Or we can have a mitten. And so if you look here, look at this. That's a left-handed mitten. Some people say mitten here. And you can have left or right-handed mittens. And there's an insect on the back of here. It's a little lightning bug. That's exciting. All right, so when you're using your identification skills, one thing that you can also do is use your nose. So sometimes you can crush a stem or a leaf very gently, as long as there's enough of them, and you will get a fragrance from this. And if you were to crush this leaf, you would have a very distinctive fragrance that would come from this. And that can help with identification also. And usually if you're trying to use a field guide or look something up online, it will tell you if it has a fragrance in the stems or in the leaves or in the flowers. And so you can use that. Speaking of looking up plants online, there are apps out there that you can use to take a picture of a plant leaf, a plant part, usually the leaf, and it will help you figure out who it is. And so these are very helpful, and they're getting more and more accurate all the time. And part of the way they do that is through crowdsourcing and confirming. So when it takes a picture and you say, yes, that's it, it says, okay, and then it has a better confidence that that's the plant and can help other people. But you need to make sure that what it's telling you is the right thing. And so you have to double check what the app is telling you. You go use another source and you compare all these features, the leaves, the bark, the habit, the fragrance, the lobes, the serrations, the petioles, to make sure that what the plant app is telling you is the correct thing. Just don't assume that because the app told you something that it's correct. They're not quite there yet to get everything right all the time. Another detail that we try to look for when we're identifying plants is called the leaf arrangement of the plant. And so there's typically 3 options for leaf arrangement. That's opposite, alternate, or whorled. And so here on this seedling ash tree, we see that these leaves are arranged opposite. And opposite means that at each growing point, there is one leaf growing directly across from the other leaf. So you see here, there's 1 and 2, right? Directly across from each other. And so that's what opposite means. And you'll see that all plants, or most plants, are divided up into opposite, alternate, or whorled. And here you can see alternate, an example of alternate. See here, there's only one leaf emerging from a growing point, and they alternate sides of the stem up the stem. And so this is what alternate means. So you may have opposite, alternate, or whorled when you're looking at a plant. And if you can narrow this down, that will help you a lot with figuring out how to identify the plant. If a stem has hairs on it, that can help you with identification also. You can look at the leaves for hairs, or you can check out the stems and see if they're hairy. In this case, the stem is pretty hairy, so that helps. Instead of hairs, look, this stem has no hairs on it, but it does have thorns. And so that can help you narrow down your options also. Did you know that needles are types of leaves? They're modified leaves. So a needle is a leaf shape also. And so you can use the needle leaf shape to help you decide who this is also. Also, whether or not the tree is, or the plant is evergreen or deciduous helps you with identification. So evergreen means that the leaves stay on and green throughout the year, even in the winter. And deciduous means that the leaves drop at some part of the year when the plant goes dormant, usually in the fall. They fall off. And just because a plant has needles does not mean that it's evergreen. So you can't always make that assumption. In this case, this is our hemlock, and it is evergreen. One of the distinctive characteristics of a hemlock, when you take a look at the needles or these modified leaves that are shaped like needles, what you'll notice is on the top of the stem here, in between the needled leaves, are these tiny little needles that are flipped over upside down, exposing two white stripes. And that flipped upside down on the top of the stem is a good characteristic that tells you this is an eastern hemlock. If you flip the stems over, you'll see that on the undersides, they do have these white stripes, these two white stripes, and that helps you with identification also. Now, using your skills, or this opposite or alternate branching arrangement here. You can also use seed pods to help you with identification. Just because something isn't flowering anymore doesn't mean that it doesn't have clues to tell you who it is. And so you can use the shape of the seed pod, what color it is, when it's dried, what shape it is, how it opens, if it splits open, how the seeds come out, if the seeds hang out inside there or if they are expelled in some way or if the wind takes them away. That can also help you with figuring out what plant you're looking at. Here we see the buds of a maple tree. These are summer buds, so they're going to look different than what you might find in the winter. But using the buds of the tree, again, the shape, color, size, texture, and whether or not they have patterns on them, like scales or just little, like a little cover on them. That all of those will help you better identify these plants as well. So you want to look at the buds. The key to identification of any plant, and probably anything, is to take in as many details as possible. Look at all the clues that that plant is giving you and note the details. There are many plants that look very similar, but when you look at the details, you can tell a lot about them and you can start to tell them all apart. So all maples might look the same to you now, but when you start looking at the lobes on the leaves and the buds and the petioles, you'll start noticing these little differences that will help you figure out who they are. Flowers are also a great tool for helping to figure out what a plant is. And when a plant is blooming, it's probably one of the easiest tools. In fact, some identification guides just use flowers to start off with because they're so distinctive. So some of the information that you look for when you're looking at a flower that you want to take note of is how many petals does it have? And what color is it? Does it have a fragrance? How large is it? Is it the size of a quarter? Is it the size of a cantaloupe? Is it the size of a peppercorn? You want to know that. And you want to look at the reproductive parts in the flower. So the centers of the flowers generally have the reproductive parts, pistils and stamens. And so you want to see the quantity and the color there. And all of that will help you. The time of the year it's blooming will also give you a clue as to what it is. So now that you know some of the basics about plant identification, I'm going to just show you a plant and see if you can start using the names of how to identify plants in describing this. And so remember, you want to look at the details. So here we have the flowers, right? How many petals? What's going on? What's the shape of the whole flower structure? Then we go down the stem. What's the leaf arrangement? What do the buds look like? Are the stems hairy? Or are they smooth? And what about the leaves? How would we describe the leaves? Are they lobed? Do they have teeth? Are they fuzzy? How does the bottom compare with the top? And are we looking at a tree or a shrub or a herbaceous plant? What do you think? What's the habit of this plant? So those are the questions that you ask yourself as you're starting to learn how to identify plants. And we hope that we'll see you in the Arboretum soon, that you enjoy this great American campout, and that you will join us and Earth Fest Presents for many more informational programs and walks in the woods where we can learn how to identify plants together and test all of this great knowledge and experience you have now. We'll see you soon.